Good morning, I'm Neil Lachlan MacDonald, Minister of Lochbroom and Coigach Free Church, and I'm sure that you would agree with me when I say that faithfulness is one of the supreme attributes in life. Faithfulness is something that we would all wish to aspire to in increasing measure, whether it's in marriage, in business, in friendship, or in life in general. Faithfulness is an attribute that we typically assign to God because great is his faithfulness. You know, one writer said the greatest ability is dependability, and there is so much truth to that. I'm sure we can all think of examples of those who have exhibited faithfulness in our lives, those who have been dependable, none more so than Christ our Saviour. But it's great that we have opportunity to appeal to others who have demonstrated this biblical truth for us. None more so than Daniel, I think, found in the Old Testament. Daniel is a real picture of faithfulness. And as we open Daniel, and particularly Daniel 6, I'm alluding to this morning, we find a man who was characterized by faithfulness. He was faithful consistently, professionally. He was faithful when he was under scrutiny. He was faithful spiritually. He was absolutely devoted to his God. He had resolved, he had determined, though he was in a foreign land amongst foreign people, to pledge his allegiance wholly and fully to his God and to live for him. It's very interesting here that Babylon had fallen and that a new kingdom had arisen, just as Daniel had predicted back in chapter 2. This Medo-Persian Empire is fully in control. But the focus of Daniel 6 isn't the Medo-Persian Empire and its might. It's not even Darius the Mede. The real focus in this chapter is the faithfulness of Daniel. It's not even the lions per se, although they are known to us. But Daniel was faithful consistently. The interesting thing here is that Daniel would have been around about 85 years old at this time. He's been in Babylon for about 70 years. The captivity is almost over, but he's been there since he was a teenager. And in the time that he has been there, the teenager who had purposed in his heart not to defile himself with the king's delicacies is the Daniel who is still living faithfully. 6 kings have come and 6 kings have gone. 1 kingdom has left. Another kingdom has arisen. But Daniel is still there. He's still on the job. He's still serving. He's faithful. He's serving the Lord in the reign of all of these kings and in these nations that rise and nations that fall. Daniel was consistently faithful. He was one who was willing to work for the Lord. He may be elderly, but he's not retired. It's interesting that Thomas Edison, at the age of 90, was still inventing things. That Frank Lloyd Wright, at the age of 90, was still drawing things. That Michelangelo, at the age of 89, painted his perhaps most famous work, still hanging in the Sistine Chapel, called The Last Judgment. John Wesley, by all accounts, at the age of 88, could still preach winsomely, articulately, and forcefully, having travelled over 250,000 miles in his lifetime, by horse, I add. Billy Graham, at the age of 95, was still writing books, still preparing for another evangelistic outreach. I'm sure there are many others that we know who we could consider were faithful consistently over a long period of time. And faithfulness is just doing the right thing over and over and over again. Not only was Daniel faithful consistently, he was also faithful professionally. And we see that throughout his life, because though he served kings who didn't share his faith, when his spirit was seen, when this excellent spirit, when his Christian work ethic was evident to those who were in charge, he was given positions of status, positions of authority. Daniel truly lived up to the call to be light in the darkness, to let his light shine so that others would see his good works and glorify God in heaven as a result. And that's the great call that's on our lives, not just on Daniel's life. And where is the place that many of us spend most of our time apart from our homes? Well, it's our workplace, isn't it? Our workplace is the greatest stage, it's the greatest platform by which we might demonstrate our faith, the faith that we profess, that we may exhibit the fruit of the Spirit as we display it in deepening and more meaningful ways as time goes by. Our workplace should be the place where our faithfulness is made known and where the gospel and its impact on our lives becomes evident to those around about us. That's what we see in Daniel. He's working hard. He's consistently faithful. He's doing it in the church, in the home, and in the workplace. A powerful witness in the workplace the Lord can really use for significant things. Daniel was faithful consistently. Daniel was faithful professionally. Daniel was faithful whilst under scrutiny. You know, people were looking at him. People were seeking even ways that he might stumble or fall. Indeed, they didn't want him to have the position that he got. They didn't want him to fulfill the role that he'd been given, and so they want him to fall. They want to find a way to bring him down. But what they find is that Daniel is blameless. He is above reproach. There are no skeletons in Daniel's closet. There is nothing that they could find to discredit him. There is no case of negligence. Here is Daniel, a powerful political figure in whom there is no corruption. Isn't that an interesting thing? These people do an investigation on him. They go deep into his past and they can find nothing on him. It was Lord Acton who said, "Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." Well, here's Daniel. He has almost absolute power. He almost always had absolute power in the book of Daniel, as we see, and yet in him there is no corruption. He's been a controversial figure, because he has stood steadfastly for God. But in his controversy, he has not stumbled or faltered. He was controversial, but in the right way. He was controversial because he stood his ground to be faithful to God. That brings us to our final element of faithfulness today in Daniel's life, and that was he was faithful spiritually. You can see that in verses 10 to 15 of Daniel chapter 6. Because they can't find anything on him, they go underhand to the king to outlaw prayer. For the next 30 days, you cannot pray to anybody other than the king. Did Daniel stop praying? Of course he didn't. He went home, he opens his windows facing west toward Jerusalem, and he got down on his knees and he prays 3 times a day. Some may say, well, Daniel, wasn't that a little ostentatious? Wasn't that a bit rebellious? Wasn't that a bit in your face? No, this is a picture of faithfulness. He did just as he had done before. This wasn't new. This wasn't novel. This was Daniel exercising his faithfulness in prayer. Not worried what the consequences would be. More concerned with honouring his God through prayer. Daniel is a great picture of faithfulness to us. He is a man who was faithful consistently. He was a man who was faithful professionally. He was a man who was faithful under scrutiny. And he was a man who was faithful spiritually. And we would do well to follow in Daniel's footsteps.